Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Taking AP into the Future, the Magic of Artificial Intelligence, brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by Tradeshift. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started today. If you have any technical questions or issues using the WebEx platform, please use the chat box and I will respond right away. If you have any issues with audio, please click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive the teleconference information. For those that do call in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted today. If you happen to get disconnected, you can log on again using the instructions provided in your webinar confirmation email. If you continue to experience difficulty, please email webinars@iofm.com and we will respond as soon as we can. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. At the end of the presentation, we will have our presenters answer these questions today, and they may also touch on them throughout the presentation as well. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. And with all of that out of the way, I would like to introduce our speakers today. We will hear from Jonathan Lavarince. Jonathan is the head of digital innovation for Tradeshift. He focuses on the digital trends that create engaging stories to support the global commercialization, messaging, positioning, and GTM strategy of Tradeshift products. Before Tradeshift, Jonathan was a digital evangelist and product marketer at Channel Advisor, was director of B2B marketing for the Second City, and created industry disruptive, innovative marketing programs at Bosch Power Tools North America. Jonathan and his family live and play outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. And today we will also hear from Jess Shear. Jess is an award-winning business reporter covering the needs of financial operations professionals for more than 2 decades. As IOFM's executive editor, Jess is responsible for continually updating member content on iofm.com, as well as building our certification and event agendas. He is a popular speaker, hosting dozens of webinars each year and keynoting IOFM's conferences. And at this time, I would like to welcome our speakers and hand the webinar off to Jess.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us. Before
Thanks.
we get into the magic of AI, I think it's important that we start, Jonathan, with the status quo, where we are now. What does the world look like from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Jess. And let me just walk through here. You know, what's really fascinating is I feel like the status quo of accounts payable has fundamentally not changed in a long time. You know, if you look at this, this chart here, as you all know, in a fully analog accounts payable process, an invoice is generated and sent by a supplier, and then it's printed, walked to an approver, an invoice data is entered, data is approved, a check is written, and the check is mailed back to the supplier. You know, that's kind of the status quo. And on the B2B side, the lack of interoperability between these steps caused by by the disruption that we've seen with COVID, caused by just disruption between the right hand and the left hand, and in many organizations not knowing what's happening. Largely analog processes, have created this AP payable accounts payable process that used to be 30 to 90 days. In some cases now, unilaterally decisions have been made to take that up to 120 days for payment. And it's unfortunate that so many organizations think they're going through this digital transformation, and yet largely we see businesses still going through the AP process, largely in an analog way. And I can talk about some data behind that, but if I'm gonna draw the line in the sand today, just that would probably be it.
Yeah, according to our data, 77% of organizations have some technology, but that's
Yeah,
a far cry from having a fully automated AI end-to-end process, right? So they may
absolutely.
have some piece that, they hire a company to open invoices, open the mail, or to scan data, or to work with workflow, or to make payments, but
Mhm.
rarely do they have all those dots connected.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think that's kind of the challenge of where we are today, where there has been this incredible adoption curve during the pandemic because we literally couldn't go into the office. But I think what we're starting to see is a transition from piecemeal solutions to something that's a little bit more holistic, that puts a chart like this in a single automated tool.
Yeah, yeah, and it is interesting because as I was saying here a couple seconds ago, and you alluded to it as well. You have a lot of organizations out there that feel that they are digital, they know where they're going, they are all in, but you know AP departments are still flooded with paper. you know what we've seen over at Tradeshift, and what we've seen from a lot of the analysts out there, just like and folks like you are bringing in these numbers. Only a quarter of suppliers are submitting electronically. There's this
Yeah.
challenge right now that so many of these documents have to be manually processed. That means, that, in a larger organization, um, you know, your AP teams, your teams can be keying in tens of thousands of invoices per month into your ERP or accounting systems. And the hard part there, Jess, is, that at some point that's not scalable. You can't just throw more bodies at it. There's a at some point that you hit that point where it's just not doable.
Absolutely. Digitizing paper isn't the answer, right? Simply taking the existing process and trying to make it go a little bit faster is a good start, but it's certainly not the answer. The other thing that you raised, and I don't know if this is why you're laughing at the idea of throwing bodies at it, but there just aren't enough bodies out there anymore, right? The days of us being able to go out and hire to our heart's content to fill those roles. Every AP department I talk to says they're shorthanded.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we were talking earlier, Jess, and you brought out, you had a interesting little conversation with someone recently, wasn't it, about hiring because and I'll let you tell the story. It's a good story.
well, I've got a couple. So is it the Taco Bell story?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was stunned by that one.
Yeah. So at our conference, at IOFM's conference in the spring, one of the people said, "We're competing with the likes of Taco Bell for talent." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "We're paying the same rate these days, right? Taco Bell, fast food, low stress kinds of jobs are paying the same $15 to $20 an hour these days.
Mhm.
That's what we're paying for entry level talent. It's not entry level responsibility, but it's entry level at within the AP department. And so
Mhm.
the question becomes, at Taco Bell, when your shift is over, you get to go home. What we're experiencing now in AP departments is 50-hour work weeks on average. We're experiencing burnout by about half of all staff tell us that they're feeling burned out. Those that are burned out are twice as likely to leave, and there aren't as many people to go out and hire to replace them. Never mind to backfill the roles that we lost during the downturn.
Right.
Um, and so I think we're facing a number of issues.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just flipped the slide over here
yeah,
because I wanted to point out, you're talking about these teams that are having to do so much already. And when you consider that, 22% of an AP staffer's time is handling supplier inquiries. everything from tracking down and correcting supplier invoice contact information or other missing pieces of information to fielding supplier queries about the timing of invoice payments. All of that is taking away from, what their focus is. If, like you said, you've got these teams out there that are just sitting all day long and churning through invoice after invoice after invoice. Things like this are slowing them down, and there's not enough bodies. Jess, there are just not enough bodies um, available anymore.
So
So
let's
yeah,
transition to what is the answer, because the answer isn't just continuing to do what we've always done with
no,
a little bit of technology help. The answer really is the magic of AI, and I think of the definition of magic, which is science that works.
hmm
And
yeah,
I think, right? And I think, what we're talking about here is a real transformation, not just throwing more technology at the answer, but really changing the processes, changing at a fundamental level how we do what we do.
right. I agree, because when you really start to take a look at the challenges of a manual system
Hmm.
and all of those elements that 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 an organization that's not truly embraced um, digitalization, who might be doing things digitally, but not truly have gone those next steps. When I say digitalization versus digitization, um, those to me mean two very different things. When I think of something that's digitalized, or I think of things that are much more collaborative. When I think of something that's just been digitized, to me, that's taking a document and turning it into a PDF,
Hmm.
or taking that PDF and turning it into importing it into an ERP or AP solution. It's one step. It's not a a digital first sort of a solution. And by failure to embrace that digital solution, which we talk about it as magic, um, you know, um, by failing to embrace that digital solution, you set yourself up for shortcomings as an organization, and you set yourself up for um, all of these challenges of the manual system and so much more. And who on this call really wants to deal with any of these challenges? I know myself and my organization, we don't want to deal with things like this. Um, you know but by implementing a a near magic or an automated solution, AP solution, we get to implement the not just the concepts but the rules. We get to train the machines. We get to start moving ourselves to a place where things become scalable, where you're not having to worry about bodies for no longer having to worry about bodies for manual processes. Now you're able to start turning your teams into what you hired them for to begin with. To be strategic for your organization, to rely on um, rely on automation and AI to take over some of those mundane tasks, um, and start to move your organization forwards, so that you can, when you really start thinking about your sourcing, and you
Hmm.
start thinking about spend analysis, you can really start focusing on the strategic spend, and then uh, start aligning more of your automation towards that tail spend. And I know I've kind of gone down a little rabbit hole with Jess.
No, but I think that's crucially important, because the issue isn't just technology. The issue really is changing the process, right?
Mhm.
Let me give you a couple examples.
Yeah, please.
Um, so one company that was trying to digitize brought in electronic invoices, at least as a first step, right?
Mhm.
And at that company, there were still AP clerks that were printing out the electronic invoice and then manually routing it around because that's how they felt most comfortable. It got to the point where the print key was jimmied off of keypads, just as a subtle reminder. And they finally got to the point where they unplugged the printers and you had to go into the director's office. If you absolutely positively needed something printed, you had to justify it, right? And why is that? Because the process didn't change. There was just this new digital piece that no one quite understood. And so being able to understand why today's processes are broken
Mhm.
and what can be done about it is a crucial element.
Absolutely.
And this is a challenge for companies of all sizes. I think of Walmart, for example. Their process is approximately 100 million invoices a year. They have the scale to justify any technology investment they want,
Mhm.
and they're automating 99% of it, which is fantastic, right? That's a number any of us would kill for. But it
Mhm.
still means that they have to manually touch a million invoices a year, right? The scale of the problem we're all dealing with is tremendous,
Mhm.
and
Well, I
I
mean,
think go
yeah,
go ahead.
you think about that, and that number itself, handling a million invoices a year. When you're looking at 100 million, oh, well, they're only having to handle a million invoices a year. But when you start to think of the average AP staffer, how many invoices do they handle? How many invoices can they handle a day?
40.
You know, about 40.
Yeah, I don't know if that was if you're looking for a specific answer, but
That's exactly what we're looking at here,
40
Jeff.
to 50 is a max number.
40 to
Um,
50. I mean, you start looking at that number and you look at having to scale staffing alone, FTEs. Uh, you know, when you start to get to processing a million invoices a year, that team gets pretty large pretty fast. And there's only so much you can do. Like you said, like we've got back to before, because there are only so many people out there who are doing this and are interested in doing this.
so our attendees don't need to be reminded of how busy they are and how things don't work.
True,
Let's
true,
let
true, true,
let
true.
let's move on to the next topic.
Yeah, let's move on to our next topic. Our next topic is, it's the landscape. It's the future is now, and I think it's really important when we start to think about, what is the future of AP and AI, and what does that landscape look like? What could a easy process look like now? Because I think that when we start really thinking about the way we automate things, um, you know, this is a great another representation from Business Insider. Um, but it's as simple as invoices submitted to the invoicing platform. It says right there, or it originates in a natively digital environment, as I was saying before, where the buyer can capture platform data, then it's processed against rules, and with the help of the AI engine, are approved all within a platform, or the payment, and then the payment goes out to a supplier via ACH wire or other electronic transfer mechanism. This really, when you look at this, it really is, with AI built into this, it becomes almost a three-step process. Even, we're showing four here, because of the inbounds and the outbounds and the processing steps. But the great thing about this is that when you start to implement your AP, um, AI into your AP process, you start to remove barriers. You start to remove, um, you start to remove the the gaps, you start to remove the hurdles that your team has to go through, whether that's redundant processing, whether that's an approvals process, whether that's making sure that something is under a certain financial threshold. These are just basic concepts. Making sure that you've got but then even a little bit deeper, ensuring that the purchase itself is compliant within a certain set of guidelines. So much can be trained into an AI bot, um, that it allows you to start to automate some of these processes, which in many cases we really think about as heavily labor intensive, or have been thought of labor intensive in the past. To your point, earlier, Jess, there's no longer that printing out of an invoice and doing two-way or three-way matching against your PO to ensure that everything has been delivered. There's with AI in play, you can set up the rules to manage exception handling. One of our clients had something like 100,000 exceptions sitting in a file cabinet that they just got to them when they could because they had so much other work, so many other invoices they were processing on a regular basis. When they got to an exception, they didn't spend the time on it because it took up too much valuable time when they could be invoicing, when they could be matching. So they just set it aside, and it was 115,000 exceptions sitting in a vault basically. And we brought in AI. We set up the rules. We trained the machine, and we were able to help them overcome that hurdle of those 115,000 extra exceptions and get those processed and paid. So that this company, they were sitting on $1.5 million of of un um, of unpaid, not unpaid, excuse me, unbilled because they couldn't get everything matched correctly. So by bringing in our Ada, which is our AI bot, they were able to recognize about $1.5 million in revenue, additional revenue in about 6 months. Uh, you know, but it doesn't happen if you don't take those first steps. You know,
Absolutely.
and that's the biggest thing. And I think, obviously I can show some wonderful little, new little chart here. AI itself, automation can cut costs by 81% and improve efficiency by 73%. That's all well and good. Numbers are numbers, but when you can start to recognize that into revenue, uh, you know, you may have the pain that comes in initially from the stress of bringing in an automated process. But let's be honest, AI does an exceptional job of managing those tedious tasks, the two-way matching, the exception handling, all these things that that you're throwing bodies at, and you're killing yourself in an organization to get done. And I know that I keep coming back to the the labor element of it. And there's so much more that AI can do than just supplement a body. And I think it's really, really, really crucial here that we recognize that bringing AI in is not about replacing a person. You know,
Right.
let's be really, really clear about that. What AI does remarkably well is to take those tedious tasks and actually learn how to do them so that your teams don't have to. I mean, in most cases, an organization is always going to start with some sort of rules-based automation, and then move into AI. There's a learning curve, of course, with AI, but over time, AI really can take over those monotonous tasks. For example, line matching, as I was saying, two and three-way matching, line coding for payments, routing for automatic approvals, exception handling, automating internal controls to secure AP processes like, obligation to pay, discount capture, data entry, invoice payment, even spend analysis reporting. By starting to bring in all of this data, it is just so remarkable what AI can actually do, and how AI can truly, when truly well implemented, can can help an accounts payable team really streamline the way that they do business. And I'm sorry,
No, no, go ahead.
I
You
got a
you
rant.
you,
I
you
rant.
mentioned no, 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 go. I just feel like I need to wind you up because you're just a fount of knowledge. But I did want you to pause because you said something that I just wanted to echo and then unpack a little bit
Yeah,
because it's such an important point.
yeah,
One of the things that I think has turned people off from recommending automation is this fear that they're going to be automated out of the job. And the
Oh, yeah.
reality is that couldn't be further from the truth, especially in today's environment,
Yeah, let's be clear.
right?
This is not the future. Gang, there is no future that looks like a whole bunch of robots sitting in a room or computers just doing your work for you. That's not going to happen. There's too much uh, there's too much finesse and too much required um, in rules, in automation, in the pieces of function that the human brain will always do more effectively and more efficiently. And somebody's got to train the machines. So and somebody's got to be there to do the strategic stuff. And and I'll let you. I'm sorry, Jess, for jumping back in.
No, no, no.
I'll let you go.
No, it's an important point. Um, we're not dealing with machines replacing us. We're dealing with how do we survive this period. So let me share two things. One, I was fact checked in real time, so I wanted to give Tanya credit for this. Jonathan, she jumped in. We made someone laugh out loud. You can't say LOL if you don't actually laugh out loud. That would
Ah,
that would be facetious. So she said, "Gone are the days where we're only responsible for 50 invoices a year, 50 invoices a day rather. The number is closer to 50 to 100 these days
wow.
per person.
50 to 100.
50
Tanya,
to
God bless you, girl.
yeah. So I was basing that on 10,000 invoices a year per person,
Uh-huh.
which comes out to 200 business days or 50 a day.
Uh-huh.
But if that number needs to be doubled, then folks are in need of AI more than ever. The other
Absolutely.
thing I was going to share is the number 54%.
Hmm.
We've just completed a survey. Literally, I was still crunching numbers this morning, but we're looking at 54% of folks are vulnerable to leave their organizations. Roughly a third are leaving in the next 5 years due to retirement age,
Hmm.
um, and another 20 plus percent are burned out and looking to leave because of those factors. And so you add that together,
100
it's
invoices a
north
day. I can't imagine why.
it's it's north of 50%. And I
Yeah.
think Tanya is
Yeah.
describing that where expectations are doubling,
Hmm.
um,
And the
burnout
workday's
is,
not.
is is
Let's be
is on the
clear.
rise, and it still needs to get done, right? And so the days are going longer. Factor in the fact that we're now commuting to an office, so that adds another 2 hours a day on
Hmm.
average to someone's workday, another 10 hours a week just in the commute that we didn't have to worry about the last couple of years. Our work days are getting longer because there's more invoices to process per person. It is a tremendous challenge, and I think one of the things that we absolutely need. Tanya's our new best friend. She refers to AI as a blessing.
Oh, yeah. Tanya, you and I, we need to talk, girl. You will have my information at the end of this session. Please do feel free to reach out, Tanya. I'd love to
Yeah.
talk to you. No, yeah, I agree. And AI really is, um, it is not the devil. There's been a lot of, when I first approached AI, even myself, you have um, you have the Bill Gates, um, the Stephen Hawking's, the Elon Musk's of the world saying we've got to be very careful with it, and I agree. We do have to be very careful with AI, but when you really think about this, we rely on so many cutting edge technologies in our everyday life. Why should technology for business be any different? When it comes down to it, we have um, we have AI engines all the time in our consumer world, uh, telling us on Netflix what movie to watch next, or when we're on Amazon shopping, telling us what product might be the right purchase for us. These are learned processes. These are AI bots in the background doing that same work, helping us understand how to, AI, suggesting a better route for us if we're driving because there might be traffic there, automatically rerouting us. Some of this is logic based, some of this is rules based, but even more so now, a lot of this consumer technology that we just take for granted because it's something that we get proactively is um, is is really helping us become more efficient in our everyday lives. You know, uh, so why shouldn't I employ the same level of automation at work? When Tanya tells us that AI is a blessing, it is not. Let's be real clear. AI is not going to be your blessing on day one. Absolutely. There is going to be a learning curve. There's going to be, we talk about this all the time. You get people get in there and they expect AI to solve their problems on day one. If you expect it to solve your problems on day one, you're going to be disappointed. Um, I would not expect AI to work for me on day one any more than I would expect my newborn to walk across the room. Uh, you know, Everything has a learning curve. And Jess, you and I were talking about this last week a little bit
Yeah.
too. I'm not, and I know I'm kind of going down different rabbit holes here today,
Yeah,
but
but this is an important one because I can't tell you the number of folks who right out of the box, if they're not getting those results as you're sharing before, a 77% improvement in efficiency on day one, they
Mhm.
assume it's broken,
Or it doesn't work
that
for them.
it
Yeah.
doesn't work for them, that it was the wrong technology, they have to go buy something else. The reality is, and I'll mention some brand names because I'm not in marketing,
Hmm.
but think about how wonderful a Tesla is, for example, right? It learns your route and can drive autonomously.
Hmm.
Not on day one, it's got to learn the route. Think about your Echo and the programming or your automated thermostat, your
Hmm.
AI
Your
thermostat.
Nest. Yeah. Your
Right,
Nest,
exactly.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that learns your habits and then can be more efficient. But
Hmm.
but on day one, if you expected it to have your schedule memorized without learning those habits, it couldn't do it. The good news is, I think the learning curve for AI is much shorter than the human learning curve, right? No
So.
matter no matter what the technology is, things always get worse before they get better because we have to learn new processes, learn how to do new things in a new way.
Hmm.
So this is
Absolutely.
this is absolutely a way of shortening a learning curve, but I think it's important to be transparent that there are challenges, there are sort of initial delays in any success.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's really, really important to take a look at that, Jess, and recognize all the different things that AI can do for your business, because um, it's not just as simple as, oh, I'll push this button for him, or I'll do this, I'll run this equation, or I'll fact check the numbers. You know, Today's AI is much different than the first AI that was developed and talked about so many years ago. You know, when you start thinking about um, when you start thinking really about the way that AI was developed, back in the 1950s, of course, you started getting all of your different technologies in place and all the different AI. What was that? The Turing test, for instance,
Right.
to prove AI. I think that was 1950 is when that first came out. And even in 1955 is the first time AI was coined. So AI, the concept of AI and artificial intelligence has been around for a really long time, and even as far back as Greek mythology, AI is referred to. Um, but it wasn't until you start thinking about like IBM and what they did with Watson.
Hmm.
You know, IBM started in 2004 training Watson, and it wasn't until 2011 that Watson actually did that. I think it was played Jeopardy. Was that right? Won Jeopardy
Right.
Listening and learning. And, that learning curve is going to be applied to everything. So you have AI that can do a numbers game for you. You have AI that can do routing for you. You have AI that can do um, that it can do um, that can manage data. But there's so much more that it can do. I know that there's some question about how can it help me with security.
Mm.
How can it help me with, how can it help me with some of these things? I alluded to spend analysis earlier, and this is where your AI really starts to, and automation both really become super valuable for you as an organization. Uh, you know, we can go down a lot of different roads, but I'd like to uncover this one a little bit because when you start to think about um, as an organization all the things you go through, and if you're doing spend analysis and you are in this, you're very easily going to recognize, if you're looking at that spend curve, you've got 20% is strategic spend, 80% is long tail, but sadly. Um, you're doing that long tail only accounts for about 20% of your spend, where your strategic accounts for 80%. Um, but those invoices are much more tightly managed, and because you have those relationships, because your procurement organization has has fostered those relationships and developed those relationships, they have a much tighter um, control over the way those are processed, the security processes that go through them, and the entire view upstream and downstream in your supply chain. When you start looking at that tail spend or rogue spend, whatever you want to call it, um, that's where AI can really become your friend, because AI can start to uncover the the trends and start to uncover the pockets of purchasing that can allow you, as a strategic team in AI, in AP, to really find those pockets and buckets of spend which can actually be brought in. You can work with your procurement team and provide them a deeper insight, so you can actually turn some of that long tail or rogue or spend into strategic spend. Um, this is the sort of thing that would, otherwise trying to comb through that data in all that spare time that you've got that you're not processing invoices, would likely never get done. Now, when it comes to risk management and compliance management, once again, if you have um, humans processing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but we are prone to errors, especially if you're trying to process 100 invoices a day. Uh, Tanya, you're gonna run into this place where you forget to check a box, or you forget to make sure that it's got the right documentation, because whatever's coming through has got to be certified from point of origin all the way through, where AI or a bot would automatically check for that because it's been trained to do that, so that again, over and over again, you're able to start streamlining the way that these processes are being managed. Um, not to mention clearance or compliance models when you're dealing with other countries. There's so many steps that go through country compliance. By implementing AI on your side, you can get a lot of those processes underway, and then rely on humans to get you through that last mile. And I know I'm rambling on here, just so you wound me up, and I'm sorry.
No, but it's important, and it's an important distinction. Before we get into the rise of the teams, we have another comment from our friend Tanya.
Yeah.
So she used to work for Jefferson University Hospital,
Okay.
um, where manual 12 years ago, 2 people processed 200 to 300 invoices a day. I can only imagine what that number looks like now.
Oh my word.
Um, AI makes it so much easier to address issues that used to take days and sometimes weeks to have fixed. The keying used to be crazy. When I left, they were just changing over to AI, and there are some issues in the first few months as you're as the tool is learning, as we talked about. Um, but I think the bottom line is 200 to 300 invoices a day for, I think it is just 2 people, it just isn't sustainable. You're going to burn out those people. Folks have other options. The days are gone where folks stick around for decades. And
Right.
as millennials replace baby boomers, generationally, we would also expect to see more turnover,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's going to be a crazy issue. Um, Tanya and I are just having a conversation.
Nope.
Um,
Okay.
sorry for the rest of you. Um, She adds that the duplications handled stop pay reissues drove her absolutely crazy.
Mhm.
AI can sort and detect those duplicates. I think that is huge. Um, One of the other things that you mentioned just in real time um, is, and I'm sorry, we got another comment, so I lost my train of thought. But but there was a challenge around, and it'll come back to me later. In the
Oh, no worries.
meantime, we have a comment from Teresa, who's asking around. Um, she used to, in an earlier slide, we had about 25% of invoices are electronic,
Mhm.
75% manual.
Mhm.
She's asking what the goal is, Jonathan. Is it to flip those? She's currently at about 2278.
Okay.
So
Okay.
she's moving in the right direction.
Absolutely
Um,
in the right direction.
um,
Ultimately, we'd love to say perfect world, everything's 100% electronic because
sure.
with 100% electronic, the invoice starts digitally. The great thing about keeping something electronic the entire time is the oversight that you have. You have such amazing oversight. You have the ability to collaborate in real time. If you have an invoice electronic from the outset, you also ensure that you're always compliant with policy. You have every single revision documented so that so that um, so that you always are staying neatly um, within what your legal department's going to be asking for.
Yeah.
But to go back to the question, what's that golden number? I would say anything north of where you are right now, and just
Yeah.
keep going. We see um, organizations on our platform moving north of 50%, moving towards 70%.
Mhm.
Um, Ideally, of course, we'd love to see 100%, but we also have to recognize that that also requires collaboration between buyers and sellers.
Right.
And that's something we haven't even touched on yet. Jess, is the importance of embracing your network of if you're on the receiving side, if uh, embracing your network of suppliers or sellers, or embracing your network of buyers, to ensure that they also are making this transition to digital, so that AI can be even more effective.
Yeah.
Because the great thing, we can even AI allows you to set up for secondary sourcing. If you're expecting a certain supply line item and it's not available from one of your from a supplier A, if you have that digital relationship set up with other suppliers, you may be able to use AI to go out and automatically find you a secondary supplier and source it and check to make sure that all the certifications are correct. If you're in a compliant works a place that requires compliance in the workplace, um, and go ahead and set up those relationships for you. And imagine from a perspective of an organization, you guys have we've in AP. In finance, treasury departments, we've typically thought ourselves as back office. But when you can start impacting the the finances of the organization by streamlining processes, by improving by improving the financial burden, or decreasing the financial burden of your organization. When you're able to start doing that, then you find yourself in more of a front office setting where you're able to start to influence change at a strategic level in your organization. That's when things start to get exciting. And when you start to get closer to those 75% digital numbers, and you start to have those relationships with your supply chain that allow you to have those, that's when you as an organization are going to start to realize the power, uh, dare I say, magic of AI.
Absolutely. And I remembered what I forgot. Um, but it's an important distinction, and that is that you're able to identify trends and do analyses that you wouldn't otherwise have time to do. For example,
Exactly.
the rogue spend that you're talking about before. We all work with special people. I'm
Yep.
sure at the university hospital there were doctors who were just too busy to approve invoices, right? Doctors are notorious for this. They're almost as bad as professors. They're almost as bad as engineers. They're almost as bad as lawyers. They're almost as bad as pick an industry. And there are folks that are notorious for just being too busy and too special to
Right.
approve invoices, right? But the great thing about AI is the ability to go back and track and say, here are the folks that have gone around the process,
Hmm.
that cost us X number of dollars in early pay discounts, and to understand why it's in their best interest to do so,
Right.
right? To really change the nature of it. And quite frankly, we don't have time when we're just trying to get through the stack of 50 to 100 invoices a day to get out the door by dinner so we can start the process all over again. We don't have time to do those kinds of analyses that could help us in the long term.
Absolutely.
But I think that's one of the beauties of AI, to be able to do that kind of analysis, spend analysis.
Right,
That's so
right. You brought
huge.
up a very good point there too, with the prepayment penalties. I mean, you think about alone, uh, how many how many things you might be able to, how much you might be able to save as an organization by streamlining these processes and able to make these payments much more quickly, much more effectively, saving yourself, you know, tens of thousands, hundred thousands, millions, based on your volume of dollars, just by streamlining the processes and just benefiting from, prepayment discounts alone. Uh,
So
while
here,
while on the other side of the street, you might be that mail carrier happens to deliver that mail to the wrong place, and your check doesn't get delivered to the right place in the right time,
right.
and you lose a prepayment discount that way. So, analog versus digital, you gotta keep thinking that way. I'm sorry, Jess, I interrupted.
No, well, I was just going to say, here's a quick rule of thumb to do some math. For every $1 billion in PO spend,
Hmm.
there's usually 3 to 5 million in early pay discounts available, right? And that was pre-COVID. During this economic period, I can tell you AR folks are desperate to get paid.
Hmm.
And so they're more than willing to continue to extend discounts and work out dynamic discounting. If 10 days isn't practical, maybe 15 to 20 days at 1% might be, as opposed to 10 days
Hmm. Hmm.
at 2%.
Yep.
Um,
And that's the great thing. You brought up dynamic discounting, Jess.
mhm.
AI can you can build into your automation and into your AI those programs that can automatically offer dynamic discounting to your buyers. So that if you are selling them goods or services, uh, you know, and you've gone through their credit with them, you understand that they have that sort of a rating you're looking for. You can set rules and train AI to automatically offer dynamic discounts uh, within the invoicing process. There's so much that AI can do. Now, obviously, you want to check this. You want to have that manual intervention in this too. Um, but wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to know that Okay, well, because of this volume, this credit rating, we're going to automatically offer based on this set of rules. So you don't have to go through that process every time to ensure that, your team doesn't have to do that every time. So,
Yeah, it can make a huge difference.
right.
You mentioned about greater security, and I think there's two components of that. One is, as we're working in this hybrid environment where we're working from home a couple days a week and working from the office a couple days a week, um, general security measures that would be taken if we were in an office environment and locked down an office environment just
Mhm.
aren't in place.
Right. Well,
And so we certainly have those risks.
right,
Go ahead,
absolutely.
and I'll talk about fraud.
Carrying a stack of papers home.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
you know, Gee, what's the chance of one of those papers getting lost? What's the chance of something
Right.
else, somebody reading something they shouldn't be reading? There's so many things that can be optimized because of digital. And when we say digital, once again, this is not about just scanning a piece of paper in. This is about having that true digitally native experience. Now, okay, great guys. If you want to scan a piece of paper in, I'm not going to fault you for that because you're moving in the right direction. You know, let's at least take those baby steps towards true digitalization. But the security of data, the security of these invoices, the security of credit card information or ACH numbers, whatever it may be, it could be very scary if you keep trying to transition between paper and electronic.
Absolutely. And then there's also the fraud component,
Oh yeah.
right? So the fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated, right?
Hmm.
I just learned last week, the notice that says this email originated from outside of your organization.
Hmm.
So the default used to be, well, if I didn't get that notice, then must confirm that therefore that it originated from inside my office.
Hmm.
And therefore, if the CEO is reaching out to me to say, hey, I need this expedited quickly, then I can trust it. No more. Fraudsters have learned how to change that and remove that language from emails. Bottom line being, fraudsters are getting more sophisticated, and the only way to combat that is for AP departments to be more sophisticated as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point, Jess. You're ringing a bell on this one, and I'm trying to remember the number I heard, especially over COVID, that
Mm.
those numbers of inbound fraud like that, paper-based, far accelerated past their regular routes. Something like a 150% increase in paper-based fraud happened during COVID.
Right.
And then something around the 30 to 35% increase in digital fraud. And please, if anybody out there knows those numbers, please feel free to correct me because I'm literally pulling these out of the air just based on something that I read a while back, and I'm trying to remember those exact numbers. But these are real concerns, and having AI in place to double check these things for you in real time um, can completely mitigate um, the concerns or heavily mitigate these concerns.
So let's talk more about the future and what the advantages are for AP departments.
That's a great place. When we talk about the benefits of AI, we've talked about a lot of different things. We've talked about removing that manual coding. We talked about, automating invoice matching. We had wonderful feedback from some of the folks here in the audience too. But I think that when we start thinking about what is the future, we have to think somehow in baby steps, Chess,
Hmm.
because for businesses out there who've not yet embraced AI, I think it's really important to focus on little steps and what we can do to get there. So I'm going to say one more thing before we move on here, um, and then I'll talk about that here for just a second. You guys, change hurts. I know that if you guys are if you guys are actually exploring this for the first time, or maybe have been focusing on your teams and what steps you need to take, um, that the concept of pivoting things over to AI and to more automated can be really scary. And if you look at this, I mean, uh, there was a CNBC report here recently that said that change is among the top 10 business fears that create roadblocks to success. And to AP, procurement, finance, treasury teams who are used to life in the back office, I understand the concept of creating change can be really, really, really hard, especially when it comes to automation. But I think it's more about just starting to do it than anything else. Um, where do we start? You know, and what do those outcomes look like? If you're just starting out, you know, map out your payments processes, uncover where those bottlenecks are in your business right now, and where do you typically run into errors? Where do you typically get bogged down? What are those processes? If you built a decision tree, for instance, where are those decisions? Can those decisions be made by someone other than that person? Can we set up a series of rules? um, Start writing out those rules. Write out the rules that move you from stage to stage in that process. um, because if you can do that, you're going to be able to more easily identify the parts of your I2P or a P2P process or AP process that you can automate. Um, by allowing yourself to start thinking about the way that things could be automated, and by taking the time to to document things, clearly document invoice volumes, turnaround times, so you can really wrap your head and your team can wrap their head around the cost of invoice processing. This is going to help you as an organization recognize where and how AI can benefit you the most effectively. And this is not just something you do on your team, not something you do yourself. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone else to help you with spin analysis. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone else to help you really map out your processes internally and validate it, fact check it against other parts of your organization. Is when you submit something to us, is this usually the process you go through? But by preparing, um, by starting to prepare your teams um, for that digital transformation, for that transition to automation, you're really going to be able to set this course. And I keep hearing Love Boat in the back of my Course for Adventure, Your Mind on a New Romance thing. But it really is going to help you as an organization um, get everyone on board and start to recognize those processes that could be beneficial to you. And dream, examine all the other strategic things that your team could do when you scale, uh, when you're able to scale, when you're able to stop focusing on the mundane tasks, allow those to be automated, and you can start focusing on strategic. You can start focusing on being an influencer inside the organization instead of just being at your desk and approving another invoice, or dealing with the exception, or doing the 2 and 3 way matching against POs and invoices. Um, we talked about this before. Recognize that AI, just like every other aware thing, must learn. So we talked about this, Jess talked about it, I talked about it. You've got to give it time to be successful. But I think the last one here is most important. Don't wait for your teams to be overwhelmed. Don't just sit there waiting for a reason or waiting for things to get so painful, because AI really is a game changer. It borders on magic. It really is. It really is this um, this wonderful, wonderful tool that allows you to just kind of catch your breath, so to speak. And it is a game changer. So embrace that. And if you've got questions about it, if you're on the fence, if you're ready to dive head forward into it, if you're looking for somebody to help you do some spin analysis or really analyze your processes, reach out to us at Tradeshift. Ping us, guys. We've got a decade of experience. I'd love to show you guys how you can recognize value from using AI and automating processes. Love to be able to talk to you more about that, especially you, Tanya. Um, but but that's kind of it. I mean, and I'm sorry, I realize we're right here at the top of the hour, and I've
Yeah, what I was going to
gone.
suggest is that if you have this up, if you have any questions, Jonathan is a great guy. I would strongly recommend reaching out to him via email.
Yeah,
With that, we've got one final question, and
please.
that's actually for you, Kelsey. People were just asking about the on-demand materials.
Yes, I can answer that. I just have a few other housekeeping notes as well to go over before we officially close out today. If you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close the webinar. This will help us better serve your needs in future webinars. And as a reminder, to answer the question, the on-demand materials will be emailed to everyone within 2 business days. And this will include a PDF of the slides as well as the link to the recording of today's presentation. And thank you again to Jess and Jonathan for a great presentation today. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. This webinar was brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by Tradeshift. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.